Today, we're diving into a series of tweets and retweets from investigative journalist Whitney Webb and a newly resurfaced email written by Jeffrey Epstein himself. They're a window into a larger system that blends intelligence agencies, financial power, and technological control in ways that most people never hear about. Here is Whitney Webb's first tweet. "My feeling is that now it is safe to release the info that Epstein was really a sex trafficker as a side gig and was mainly an intelligence asset of Israel and the US, a big-time financial criminal on behalf of transnational capital, I would argue transnational organized crime disguised as transnational capital, and an arms trader because the people he was helping have stolen so much of America's wealth and have taken control over so much of the government. That is why even admitting the true breadth of the scandal and operation doesn't even seem to move the needle. Criminals are in charge, and they run both parties. They have created the infrastructure for neo-feudalism, enforced by technology, and are herding us into the corral. Opt out of AI, digital ID, and the surveillance state that Epstein associates built now, because we still can." When Whitney says it's now safe to reveal information, she's pointing to a reality that people studying intelligence networks have understood for decades. Information becomes safe when it's no longer threatening to the people in power. It doesn't stop being shocking, it just stops being dangerous. That usually means whatever system produced the scandal is still intact, still powerful, and still functioning exactly as intended. The larger picture that Whitney is describing is not about Epstein as an individual. It's about what networks like his represent. Intelligence agencies, whether American, Israeli, British, or otherwise, have always relied on intermediaries, middlemen. People who move money, provide cover, build relationships, and operate in the gray areas between governments, corporations, and organized crime. Epstein fit that mold almost perfectly. The idea that he was more valuable as a financial operator, a facilitator of influence, and a connector between global elites than as a trafficker is consistent with how major intelligence operations have historically functioned. The sexual component is shocking, but in the world of covert power, leverage is currency, and leverage is far more profitable than pleasure. Whitney's reference to transnational capital speaks to one of the biggest themes in modern geopolitics, the merging of intelligence networks with global finance. In the 20th century, intelligence agencies were primarily run by governments. Today, many of their functions occur in private companies, investment funds, and billionaire networks that operate above national borders. These structures are nearly impossible to regulate, and they influence governments more than governments influence them. When she says these interests have taken control over much of the government, she's talking about the revolving door between intelligence, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and political leadership. In the United States, regulators often come from the same industries they're supposed to police and leave public service to work for the companies they once oversaw. That creates a system where public institutions serve private power. Whitney's warning about neo-feudalism is not poetic exaggeration. The idea is that we're moving toward a world where a small elite controls land, resources, data, and technology, while everyone else becomes dependent on digital infrastructure managed by corporations and governments working together. Instead of kings and lords, the modern equivalents are billionaires, defense contractors, and intelligence-linked tech firms. Instead of castles, we have data centers. Instead of knights enforcing order, we have algorithms and surveillance systems. This brings us to her final warning in the tweet: to opt out of AI, identity systems, and surveillance architecture while there is still a choice. Once these systems become embedded in finance, healthcare, employment, and travel, opting out may be impossible. This is not theoretical. Many countries are already building centralized digital ID systems tied to access, payments, and biometric tracking. Whitney then follows up with a second tweet. Also, all of the people who smeared me this and last year for pointing out J.D. Vance's Peter Thiel connections and why Thiel is bad, and also shaming me for not trusting in Trump should be eating their shirts right now after these recent releases. You sold the American people, Epstein associates, as political saviors, and you should apologize. This tweet shifts the conversation toward political influence. Whitney's point is that the networks connected to Epstein are not neatly divided into left and right. The same billionaires who influence democratic institutions also fund Republican figures, often simultaneously. Peter Thiel is a good example. He has deep ties to intelligence, particularly through Palantir, a company born out of collaboration with the CIA. When someone with that background funds political figures marketed as anti-establishment, it raises questions about whose interests those figures ultimately represent. Whitney is criticizing the idea that political outsiders are automatically trustworthy. In her view, many of these so-called outsiders are carefully selected by elite networks to appeal to public frustration while still serving the same groups behind the scenes. Now we move to the final, and perhaps most revealing, the email written by Jeffrey Epstein. No, Mnuchin is okay. It's simple. 15 years ago, the geriatrics understood that the internet was like telephones, connections only. Then my nerds taught them that cyber is a weapon. Same with the Fed. It's a weapon to be used with sophistication. Inflation is a concept from the 50s, before the internet set instantaneous info around the world. So dumb. This message tells us a great deal about how Epstein viewed the world he operated in. When he says the older generation thought the internet was like telephones, he's pointing out just how far behind traditional political leaders were in understanding modern power. For many decades, the people running governments and financial systems treated the internet as a simple communication tool, not as the global infrastructure of surveillance, influence, and cyber warfare it has become. Epstein's reference to "my nerds" is also revealing. Epstein surrounded himself with scientists, mathematicians, cybersecurity experts, geneticists, and technologists. They were the backbone of his influence. In the world of intelligence operations, access to emerging technology is often more valuable than access to politicians. But the most significant part of the email is his comment about the Federal Reserve being a weapon. In the bigger picture, this reflects the idea that monetary policy can be used strategically, not just economically. Interest rates, liquidity, and financial regulations can shape political outcomes, destabilize rivals, or reward allies, all without firing a shot. In modern geopolitics, financial weapons are often more powerful than military ones. His dismissal of inflation as an outdated concept reflects how digital systems have transformed the economy. In a world where information moves instantly and markets react in milliseconds, the economic frameworks of the 1950s are inadequate. Epstein's frustration reveals something deeper. The people in official positions of authority do not fully understand the systems they control. When you put Whitney Webb's tweets and Epstein's email together, a single picture emerges. It's a picture of power that operates above the surface level of politics where intelligence networks, corporate giants, mega donors, and global financial systems blend together into something that is no longer accountable to the public. Epstein was not the architect of this system. He was a functionary within it, a connector, a facilitator, and a middleman, someone who understood the value of data, technology, leverage, and influence long before the public did. Whitney Webb's warning is that these structures are still here, more powerful than ever, and they are rapidly converging with new technologies like AI, biometric identification, and centralized digital systems. Once those systems lock in, the window to opt out will close. Whether one agrees with her interpretations or not, the message remains clear. The future is being built right now, quietly, by people who wield power through networks most citizens never see. Understanding that world is the first step in recognizing how much influence it already has, and how much more it may soon have over our daily lives.